Andrew Williams, New Pacific Metals. I'm the president of the company. I joined 2 months ago. Previous to New Pacific Metals, I spent 11 years on the buy side at an institutional precious metals investment firm. Most recently as a precious metals analyst. And I made the jump in industry because of this fantastic opportunity at New Pacific, a company that's discovering and developing world-class silver and gold deposits in Bolivia. And on this introductory slide is a nice photo of our flagship silver sand project. It's the one that brought us to Bolivia in 2017 and has emerged into one of the most significant global primary silver discoveries of this past decade. So why New Pacific? We've got 3 projects, all in Bolivia. The most advanced is the Silver Sand project on the left side of the screen, which is a large silver deposit that can be mined by open pit mining methods and processed using tank leaching. And early in January of this year, we released our preliminary economic assessment, highlighting a 4 million ton per year throughput rate, producing 171 million ounces of payable silver over a 14-year life, yielding an after-tax net present value of $726 million and a 39% IRR. This year, we're heavily engaged in permitting our Silver Sand project and hope to be bringing it one step closer to being ready to finance and build, which will be an exciting and monumental occasion for the company. And Silver Sand is a company-making project in and of itself, but if that wasn't a tough enough act to follow, in the second half of 2021, the company began drilling its second project, Carangas, located in the middle of this slide. And we drilled 150 holes so far at Carangas to the end of 2022 in 64,000 meters. And what we've discovered is a 1,000-meter long by 800-meter wide silver horizon, and overlying a broad gold zone beneath that. And that gold zone and the discovery there has really changed the game for us at Carangas. And so this year, our program is to drill 15,000 meters at Carangas with 5 rigs and then complete our inaugural mineral resource estimate by the middle of this year, and then follow that up with a preliminary economic assessment by the end of this year. So Carangas is exciting, it's big, and it's moving fast. And our third project, last but not least, on the right-hand side of this slide is Silverstrike, which we started drilling it last year with a modest scout program, and we discovered a 200-meter thick near-surface oxidized gold zone of 1 gram per ton during that drilling program, and consider Silverstrike to be prospective for both Silver Sand and Carangas styles of mineralization. So what are we up to this year? Well, at our Silver Sand project, our goal is to complete a pre-feasibility study by the middle of this year. As I mentioned, we released our preliminary economic assessment at the start of this year. So we're going to tighten up a number of those assumptions, and we're completing ongoing technical work to bring that up to the rigor required of a full pre-feasibility study by the middle of this year. And as I mentioned, we're also working to complete our environmental impact assessment study, which will be a major milestone for the Silver Sand project. And then the ultimate goal is to obtain the environmental impact statement. And then finally, we're working with Comabol, which is the state-owned mining company in Bolivia, to obtain the ratification and approval of an already signed mining production contract that will unlock an additional 55 square kilometers of exploration ground surrounding our Silver Sand tenements. And then at Carangas, as I mentioned, our goal this year is to complete a 15,000-meter drill program by the end of this quarter, which should be ending this week, to extend the deep gold mineralization to the northeast and continue stepping out on the shallow silver mineralization to the southwest of the area that we've drilled off. And then use that drilling. We'll have roughly 180 holes in roughly 80,000 meters of drilling to complete our inaugural resource estimate by the middle of this year, and then roll that into a preliminary economic assessment by year end. And so this time next year, the Carangas project will be at the same stage that Silver Sand is today. So we're rapidly advancing that project, and that's ultimately how we can create such great value for our shareholders in this business. Time is money. And lastly, at Silverstrike, given how much we've got on our plate at both Silver Sand and Carangas for a company of our size, we've decided to pause exploration activities this year so that we can really focus on delivering on our important objectives at both Silver Sand and Carangas. This by no means underscores the geological potential at Silverstrike. We made the strategic decision as a company that it's in our best interest to really do what we have in front of us right at Silver Sand and Carangas, and look for us to pick Silverstrike up again, back when our internal conditions warrant. So how have we been so successful operating in Bolivia? The first bullet point suggests that we can't take all the credit for it because the geology in this country is unbelievable. Bolivia is home to the 3 billion ounce Cerro Rico silver deposit, which is one that's been continuously operating since 1545. We're also on trend with Peru, Chile, and Argentina, which are 3 countries that host not only some of the world's great deposits, but some of the world's great mines. And we know that Mother Nature doesn't tend to respect man-made borders when depositing metals. A second point that is really important to understand about Bolivia is there's a deep mining culture in the country. Mining's responsible for 30% of the national economy. It's deeply ingrained in the country's DNA. Harking back to 500 years, the Cerro Rico deposit, and right up to today, mining is an essential part of the national economy. And in 2021, Bolivia ranked as the 8th largest silver producer globally. And then the third bullet point is probably the one most important for us, is that the country has been greatly underexplored in the last 20 years. When we came into the country in 2017, there were really no other juniors operating in earnest in the country, and today there's half dozen to 10 different juniors that are operating in the country, largely in the wake of the success that we've had at Silver Sand and most recently at Carangas. And when we came in and made the Silver Sand discovery, we're really proud of using that discovery, which helped us to earn a reputation in the country as someone that's a reliable and trustworthy partner. And then we rolled that first mover advantage up and were able to acquire both Carangas and Silverstrike, and Carangas really being the latest project to bear significant fruit from those relationships and the in-country know-how that we've developed as a company. So zooming into our Silver Sand project, the Silver Sand is nested in a 3 square kilometer administrative mining contract, which grants us the right to mine. As I mentioned, though, we still need to obtain our environmental impact statement, which is something that we're working on in earnest this year. And we drilled 136,000 meters in Silver Sand, 550 holes in the 5-year span from 2017 to 2022. So we've drilled the heck out of this thing, and that database forms the basis on which we released not only our first resource estimate, but more importantly, that entire data set was used in our updated resource that we released in the fall of last year. And then that updated resource, which I'll show you on a subsequent slide, underpinned our preliminary economic assessment that we released on January 9th of this year. This 5250 cross-section gives you a nice overview of what we're dealing with geologically at Silver Sand. It's a broad disseminated fracture network. We're not chasing half-meter wide, high-grade, narrow nuggety veins as a broad disseminated bulk system that we've drilled extensively. There are areas of this deposit that we've drilled down to 5 by 5 meter spacing in order to really satisfy the most critical of QPs for our resource estimate. And another important point to note from this cross section is that the bulk of this mineralization comes right to surface. The green Tarapaya formation on the top right portion of the slide acts as an impermeable cap that stopped fluid flow from migrating from beneath, and effectively that contact then allowed the silver-bearing mineralized fluids to pool in and around that contact and preserve such a wonderful deposit so close to surface. This next slide gives you a broad overview of our updated resource estimate as compared to our 2019 resource estimate. In bold in the middle of our screen, the 2022 estimate, 201.8 million ounces of silver in measured and indicated, which is an important point to emphasize that, as I mentioned, this preliminary economic assessment was based on the 2022 resource estimate, and over 90% of that PEA was based on measured and indicated, which in the junior mining space, one of the features of a PEA study is that you're allowed to use inferred mineralization, which often can form the bulk of most juniors' PEAs. But in our case, because we'd spent so much time and effort drilling the deposit, we had such a large measured and indicated resource inventory that almost all of our PEA study was based on measured and indicated resources. And the second point to highlight is that the grade. So 116 grams silver, as I mentioned, this is an open pittable deposit, which if we put that into gold equivalent terms, that's roughly 1.5 grams, which would make this one of the nicest open pits to come online for quite some time. And so this next slide gives you a nice overview of the technical parameters that were outlined in this study. So the first bullet point, or the first line item, is the strip ratio, 3.6 to 1, which is including a 18.5 million ton pre-strip. So when we're actually in operations, that number is going to be closer to 3 to 1. And a 4 million ton per annum plant, that's 12,000 tons per day operating over 14 years. So that size of a plant is well within the scope of a company of our size and scale to design, finance, and build internally, which is really important. It's a nice bite-sized, high-grade, high-impact project. For us, 107 grams per ton silver, as I mentioned, for open pit head grade. It's just an exceptionally high grade project for us, and it makes intuitive sense when you go through the strip ratio, the grade, the recoveries, 91%, tank leach Merrill-Crowe, why this project delivers such robust economics. And we ran this study at $22.50 silver, which I think is it's in and around where the silver price is today. And the study yielded an after-tax net present value of $726 million US and a 39% after-tax IRR, which is well in excess of any reasonable hurdle rate that one would use to evaluate a construction decision on a project like this. A couple other points to highlight. Mining cost, $9.55 per ton milled. We're going to go with a contractor mining operation, and as part of our pre-feasibility study, we're going to be obtaining specific quotes from potential mining contractors. So look for us to sharpen that number up in the pre-feasibility study. Processing costs, that includes tailings dewatering, and we'll get into our tailings disposal methodology on the next slide. But one thing to note is in Bolivia, the power costs, which is often the bulk of the processing costs in any operation, our power cost is US 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and that was a quotation from a local supplier. So another contributor to why our cost structure is so competitive at the operation. And sub $2 a ton G&A, which is a number that benchmarks well against comparable operations in the country, and that all contributes to an operating cash cost of roughly $8.50 an ounce and an all-in sustaining cost of just a little over $10 an ounce silver. So an incredibly cost-competitive project at Silver Sand as outlined in our preliminary economic assessment. And the other point that we didn't touch on that last slide, which is a point that I'm particularly proud of as someone that's responsible for going out and coordinating project financing, is that in given the strong production profile in the first 4 years, as we can see on this chart, 16 million ounces per year of silver, the after-tax payback period on this project is under 2 years. And that, to put this silver production profile into perspective, 16 million ounces per year is what silver industry giant Hecla is guiding this year in their silver guidance, from 16 to 17.5 million ounces from their 3 primary silver mines combined. So that these first 4 years are going to be substantial, and that's driven by generally some higher grades that we're fortunate to be able to access in the heart of the deposit early on, and then we get into a bit of a stripping campaign in the middle section of the mine life, and then things pick up again in the back half. But this is exactly the kind of production profile where we can have rapid cash flow and payback in the early years of the mine life that is a really special attribute of the Silver Sand project. So the CapEx, $308 million initially, life of mine, $327 million. For a company of our size and our market cap, which is in and around $350, $400 million US, this is an entirely financeable project for a company like us. The biggest piece in there is the processing plant, which is that 12,000 tons per day, processing plant, 4 million tons per annum. And then the next biggest component is the pre-strip. So that'll be contractor, 18.5 million tons times our roughly $2 and change. Material movement cost gives us the $47 million pre-strip. Because we're going with a contractor, we're not bearing the upfront capital cost associated with a fleet. So there are significant capital cost savings there by going with a contractor. The next biggest piece in the capital cost estimate is site infrastructure. And if we zoom into that, $47 million, the biggest chunk is we have to bring a power line to site, 20, 30 Ks, nothing extraordinary or significantly complex, but we have to bring it to site nonetheless. And there's also a water reservoir that we need to build to capture excess rainwater for use in our processing plant. There's also some interesting positive social benefits that come from that engineered solution. So that's a really elegant feature of this project, is that there really is, in the grand scheme of things, relatively minimal infrastructure required. Tailings facility is the 4th largest item on that list, $25 million. So we've gone with a dry stack tailings facility, which the downside is that you bear a significant upfront capital cost, but the upside is that from an ecological perspective, it's by far the most benign solution. It significantly cuts down on the project's water consumption. It also significantly reduces the footprint required from the site itself, because we dewater the tailings before we dispose of them, and so the volume is significantly less. And it also offers a much more robust and stable long-term storage solution from a geotechnical perspective. So it ticks all the boxes, and it made sense for us to go with the dry stack tailings for this site. And then the final piece is that because we spend the capital early and we're disposing this dry cake material in our waste facility, is that we don't have to incur the ongoing tailings dam lifts, which are often a significant component of sustaining capital in any modern open pit mining operation. So I mentioned that we got the power quote from a local supplier. And then there's also elements of the large elements of the processing plant, equipment, and tailings facility that we sourced quotes from global suppliers on. So again, these are numbers that we're continuing to hone on the pre-feasibility study, but nonetheless, we're very pleased with how they came out in this preliminary economic assessment. And then I think this is our last slide on Silver Sand, which gives you a nice overview of the outline of the infrastructure facility. So in purple is the main pit, which hosts 97% of the silver from that one pit, and then there's little bits and pieces that come from the rest of them. Our integrated waste dump and tailings disposal facility in orange at the bottom of the screen. You can see in gray in the middle of the image is our process plant. Site access road in green. So again, going 20 to 30 kilometers south of the page here, we get a paved national highway. So the access is outstanding. The green road, we're going to just have to complete minimal upgrades on in certain sections, but I've taken that road straight to site. And so it's another feature that we're incredibly blessed with at this project. And then lastly, there's the water reservoir, which I mentioned. So you can see in blue in the middle of the image is we're going to build a roughly 3 million cubic meter water reservoir. And in the Silver Sand Project area, there's a very wet season, which lasts for a few months of the year, and then a very dry season, which lasts for the remaining 8-9 months of the year. And so in the very wet season, there's almost a meter's worth of rain that falls, and so there's too much rain for the local ecosystem to handle, and so most of it ends up flushing away, getting unused, and ending up in the ocean eventually. And then the rest of the year, there's not enough water for folks to be able to use. And so you get this boom-bust cycle. So our water reservoir, what it's going to do is capture excess rainwater so that we can use it continuously throughout the year in our process plant. But importantly, during the dry parts of the year, when the local communities are struggling for water access, we're going to be able to release excess water to them for their consumption. So it's a really elegant solution for water at the Silver Sand Project. So moving into Carangas. So Carangas is a project, our next big project, and we started drilling it in the middle of 2021, a very modest program that quickly blossomed into a full-scale assault with the drills. We had 5 drill rigs running throughout last year and continue to have 5 rigs running today. And up to the end of last year, we drilled 64,000 meters. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, we've got, once we add our existing drilling, we're going to have almost 80,000 meters of drilling in roughly 180 drill holes at Carangas. And every hole we've drilled at Carangas has intercepted that silver horizon near surface, and we've continuously hit gold mineralization in the Central Valley, and I'll give you a nice overview of the flavor of that zonation in a subsequent slide. But what we've discovered at Carangas is this 1,000-meter long by 800-meter wide silver horizon at surface that's up to 200 meters thick, and that silver horizon is stacked above a thick gold system hosted in a rhyolite intrusive. So this year, we're going to continue our last drill program before our inaugural resource estimate, and that's going to be finishing up this week. And then we look to publish that resource estimate by the middle of this year. So for the first time, we can showcase and quantify the importance of this Carangas discovery that we've been screaming at the tops of our lungs to the investment community to acknowledge just how significant this thing is. And then by the end of this year, we're going to take that resource estimate and roll it into a preliminary economic assessment. So this slide here gives you the plan view map of Carangas. So the green outlines are where we've intersected this near surface silver horizon, and that's that 1 kilometer east-west footprint. And then we've also drilled a lot of these drill holes, especially in the silver zone, have been drilled from south to north at a shallow angle. And so that footprint on the north-south has been that 800 meters. And then the Central Valley, it wasn't until hole 31 that we had an idea that there might be a gold system beneath the silver horizon. And so hole 31, instead of just drilling this deposit at 45-degree angles, our geologists took a risk and they drilled 66-degree dip angle in the Central Valley, and that's where they discovered the gold zone at depth, which has really changed the game for us at Carangas. So Carangas itself, here, this gives you an overview of what the topography looks like. The top image, we're looking west at the West Dome, which is where Battle Mountain had drilled roughly 10 holes in the mid-90s. There's some outcropping brecciated silver mineralization that looks to be the most interesting attribute of this entire system. They drilled it 100 meters, 100 grams per ton silver. Gold's $5 an ounce in the 90s. They walked away. So when we picked the project up, and started drilling, we began at the West Dome and confirmed those hits. So roughly that 100 meters, 100 grams silver. And then if you, on the bottom image, if you turn the camera around, you look at the East Dome, we drilled, you can see hole 9 there is the easternmost hole that was drilled. We confirmed silver mineralization in the East Dome and then drilled shallow holes in the Central Valley beneath the West and the East Dome, which is where we then connected this 1 kilometer long silver system. And then in the Central Valley, that's where we drilled the famous hole 31 into the gold system, which just really transform this operation for us. So this gives you a nice cross section of what we're seeing in that with that zonation at Carangas. So the top, call it 200 meters, is where we get the silver plus some lead zinc in green. So hole 44 is one that we drilled in the middle of last year, going through the silver horizon in that top 200 meters, and then transitioning through a lead zinc zone, and then into this big gold system at depth. So we went into 514 meters at 1.1 grams gold, including an 87 meter interval, 2.57 grams per ton gold. And then we at the end of last year stepped out on hole 44 with hole 96, which is the hole on the right side of this image. And that's one that we released a few weeks ago to the market after receiving our assays and incorporating it in our internal checks. So we put that hole out, and it's a classic Carangas hole. So we go right through the silver horizon, this time with really good high impact silver grades, 164 meters, 94 grams silver, and then through the transitional lead zinc zone, and then into the gold zone at depth, exactly where we had interpreted the northeastern dip on this rhyolitic intrusive. Hit 520 meters, 1.24 grams per ton gold. Had a really nice high-grade subinterval, 50 meters, 4.5 grams per ton gold. And so we're going to continue stepping out as part of this program that's almost completed. We're going to continue stepping out to the northeast in the interpreted dip direction of this rhyolitic intrusive to continue expanding the gold zone. And we're continuing to step out to the southwest of the silver horizon, which is where our guys think that has the most potential for further expansion. And then we're also continuing to infill some of the parts, in particular near surface, to make sure that we've got enough drill density for our upcoming resource. But I think what this discovery reveals is that there is great potential in Bolivia to find gold and copper underneath some of the silver mineralization. Bolivia has predominantly been known to be a silver dominant geological area, and these gold deposits are a bit of a breakthrough geologically for the country. So I think we're really challenging existing geological dogma with these deep drill holes into the gold zone at Carangas. We're also just noting that there are some interesting geological similarities to Filo Mining's Filo del Sol project, which has an extensive silver horizon at surface, big footprint, and then they drilled at depth and hit the enriched gold and copper zone. A very similar story to what we've seen at Carangas. There's also regional exploration potential at Carangas. This is an older IP survey. We're currently completing a much broader survey in the district because we think that there's a potential that this could be one of several. That's a very interesting hypothesis that our guys are continuing to push forward. So it's incumbent on us to continue flushing out the ultimate potential of Carangas, and perhaps it's part of a larger district. So that's something to stay tuned for with us here. And then here's some photos of the core. It's hosted in a Volcana Clastic unit for the geological buffs out there. And then I think this is an important point for us to touch on, the metallurgical response, in particular the gold. So when we drilled the gold at depth, you never know if it's going to be free milling or refractory. So we ran this fatal flaw metallurgical test program early in the drill campaign, and we're thrilled to see that both less than 1% and less than 3% sulfur content gold both returned over 98% recoveries to a whole ore cyanide leach. So we're absolutely thrilled. We can continue to drill it without concern with whether or not it will or will not recover. And then in the silver lead zinc zone, we've also ran tests for both oxidized, semi-oxidized, and fresh, and get really strong recoveries. So we're again very blessed at Carangas for this to be metallurgically a well-behaved deposit. And last but not least, I'll just briefly touch on our Silverstrike project. So this one, like each one of our projects, Silver Sand is in Potosi Department, Carangas is in Oruro Department, and Silverstrike is in La Paz Department. They're like provinces or states in Bolivia. And so this is our biggest land package, 45 square kilometers. Rio Tinto drilled a handful of holes there. There's artisanal dumps that are mineralized and littered throughout the entire project and project site. We started drilling the Silverstrike Central, which is in the bottom part of the image, last year in a very small program. We hit in one hole 200 meters at a gram, including a high-grade subinterval closer to surface in hole 1. Hole 2, we scissored that hole, hit 200 meters at a gram, but it got an even better higher-grade subinterval in hole 2. And this is a snapshot. If we zoom into hole 2, there's a further high-grade subinterval along the contacts between the volcaniclastic units and the rhyolites, where you can see the volcaniclastics are grading 9 grams gold and the rhyolites are grading 0.2 grams gold. So there's a really interesting geological contact there that is a high-priority target for us to step out on and follow up on once we are in a position where we can resume exploration at Silverstrike. But nonetheless, a very highly prospective piece of ground that we're really excited to get back in drilling once our internal situation permits. So to summarize, New Pacific, we've made large discoveries, silver and gold at Silver Sand, Carangas, and Silverstrike in just 5 years, which really highlight our ability to create shareholder value by carefully identifying projects, intelligently acquiring them, studying them thoroughly and methodically, and then wrapping that into a well-planned drilling campaign, which explains our extremely high success rate by the drill bit. And then we think that Bolivia is a country that still we're just scratching the surface on. And we've got a great team and a great presence and knowledge of the country. And so, we're going to continue to push forward on project identification in the country. Our capital structure, our market cap is roughly $350 million. That was US at the middle of this month. We had $17 million in cash at the end of the year. We're blessed with an extremely strong shareholder registry. 28% is Silvercorp. Our largest shareholder, Pan American Silver, our second largest at just under 10%. Management and board, 9%. 7% of that roughly is our CEO and founder, Dr. Rui Fang. And then we've got some institutional ownership, and the bulk is retail. And we're covered by 4 analysts currently. And again, this is all our success. Yes, Bolivia, the geology is great, but really it's people that make this what it is. And again, I mentioned our CEO and founder, Dr. Rui Fang. He's a serial mining entrepreneur, an exceptionally brilliant geologist, founded Silvercorp into what it is today, has created New Pacific into the company that I've just explained, which is something that continues to grow, and we're only, we think, in the early innings of Dr. Rui Fang's second major mining creation. Alex Zhang has been he's been the boots on the ground mind behind the exploration campaigns across our projects. Myself, who I gave an introduction to, our CFO, Jalen Hernan, our in-country manager, one of the best geologists in Bolivia, who works for us, and Carolina is our VP Corporate Affairs, also a Bolivian, based here in Vancouver, and plays an instrumental role in bridging the gap between Canada and Bolivia. And last but not least, I'll just give you a quick highlight on our board. Again, some incredibly talented industry heavyweights. Terry Salmon, former president, CEO, Salmon Partners, founder of that firm, is our chair, mining finance legend. Martin Waforn, I'll mention him as well. He's originally a representative of Pan American Silver, their senior vice president of technical services. And then Peter McGaw, the legendary geologist who won the prestigious Thayer Lindsley Award for his discovery of major silver deposits, is on our board and is continuing to encourage us to think bigger and bigger and bigger. He thinks that both our Silver Sand and Carangas deposits we're only scratching the surface on. So we certainly appreciate Peter McGaw's influence on our board.